First of all, I want to thank Leah for inviting me to speak with you this morning and to preside at the Great Thanksgiving. And secondly, on this lovely summer morning, please stick with me, what I'm going to say, and I promise you we will get somewhere. So, we have heard a lot about Minnesota this past week. What do you know about Minnesota? What I know is it's cold there in the winter, and that Garrison Keillor, anybody remember Garrison Keillor from Prairie Home Companion? He grew up in Minnesota. Actually, one of my parishioners moved to Minnesota from Maine, and she was ordained as a priest and served in St. Cloud for many years. And now we have a vice presidential candidate from that great state of Minnesota. As that news was breaking this week, Fran got a something on her phone from one of her sources, also about Minnesota. It seems that at the time of the Civil War, the 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment was a volunteer, they were not conscripted, regiment from Minnesota, over 400 soldiers, volunteered to serve in the Union Army. They were in several significant battles before the Battle of Gettysburg. And in that fateful battle and bloody battle, after that first awful day, on the second day, the Confederate soldiers were ready to break through the Union lines. And there was a section that needed to be held by the Union soldiers if that was not to happen. And General Meade ordered this 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment to fill in the gap. And they held until reinforcements could arrive. Of the 400 plus soldiers who entered the battle that day, 160 survived. And so, Minnesota, Gettysburg, okay? Earlier this week, I spent 1 hour with a technical assistant or whatever from my bank, trying to get it so that I could access online both my checking account and my credit account. I haven't been able to do it for years. 1 hour. Finally, she had great patience, believe me, and great skill. Finally, what we ended up with was that when I sign my name, I sign it David, capital B, period, Plank. And on my credit card, there is no period. It was the period that was blocking the total transition. And as I suggested to Leah last night, I'm sure there's a sermon there somewhere, but I'm not going there, because that led me to think, you know, people say you really should Google your own name, and you'll be surprised what you'll find. So I Googled David Bellinger Plank, and up came at least 8 others in that data bank in this country with the same name. But then what kept coming up was David Bellinger, pages of them. And that would have been my great-grandfather's name, who grew up on a small farm in upstate New York. And then started coming up David Bellinger Farm. And I thought, okay, let's see where this goes, because I'm sure it's not my great-grandfather, and it turns out there was a David Bellinger Farm at Gettysburg. Only I found out later it was John Bellinger, but that's irrelevant to the point. We're back at Gettysburg. So what do you think when you hear Gettysburg? Battle? Anything else? Death? Critical battle, Gettysburg, the Gettysburg Address. George heard this last night. The Gettysburg Address. And that is where we're going this morning. This is delivered at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war, and we have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that this nation might live. It's altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we may take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Abraham Lincoln, November 19th, 1863.